Welcome to the Pewtercast. I'm Brent Allen, your host. Today is September 20th, 2016, and this is episode 12, Recover, Recover, Recover. So how's it going, Bucs fans? Are we doing okay? You know, I tell you, this has been a very different week than last week. That is for sure. And listen, if you had taken a listen to the Instant Cast, then you know by now something happened to me that I didn't think in a million years would ever happen to me, at least not on a podcast. And I was left speechless. Coming out of this game, I had no words. I mean, for 20 minutes, I had no words. It's the most word-filled speechlessness, but I couldn't come up with anything to describe what I was feeling. You know, and as time's gone on, you know, the last, what's it been now, about 48 hours or so? We've had a chance to just kind of collect ourselves and to think about it and to go through and to kind of just recover from a walloping. Oh my word. Oh, this week I had to take some time, man. I grabbed my kids, my 4-year-old, my 1-year-old, and spent some time in the backyard playing with them. I got my 4-year-old who's in T-ball for the first time, and I've kind of become a coach on the team, which I'm more of a football guy than a baseball guy, but hey, it's just T-ball, so I'm out there trying to coach him and help him, you know, to not eat dirt and pay attention so he doesn't get hit with the ball and things like that. But, you know, it's kind of helped me recenter. It's helped me think about this game a little bit. And, you know, yeah, I don't know. I think I'm ready to do this show. I think this is going to be a great time. But, hey, listen, before we go any further, I've got some business to take care of. We've got some feedback to read. A couple weeks ago, we just got an onslaught of iTunes reviews, so I want to read one of those today. Today's iTunes review is coming from Brian for Bucs, and he says, "This is my new favorite podcast to listen to. I look forward to the next episode." Well, thanks, Brian for Bucs. We're always looking forward to the next episode. And, hey, I love that we get to be your favorite new podcast to listen to. Hopefully, we stick around there in that spot for a while for you and don't get replaced. I don't know. I tend to have ADD, so my favorite podcast of the week might be different from the one from next week. But, hey, thanks so much for that review. I really appreciate it. We got an email this week that I wanted to go ahead and read. This one is from Mitchell R., who says, "Hey there. Haven't listened to the new Instant Cast yet, but I wanted to say thank you for the podcast that you do. As a Bucs fan born and raised in Western Canada, I'm usually starved for coverage, and I love the analysis and fun that your podcast brings. I have nothing else to add. I just wanted to say thanks for the content you provide and to say that I'll be making a pilgrimage to Tampa next weekend for the home opener, my third time making the trip, and I can't wait. Go Bucs." Well, hey, Mitchell, hey, here's to you for making that trip. I don't know if you're driving, flying, walking, hitchhiking. I don't know how you're getting down there to Tampa. But, hey, Bucs fans in Tampa, find this man and treat him right. If you know, he sounds like he's not really from around there, you know, maybe he says a boot instead of a bout. That might be Mitchell. Just ask him, "Hey, is your name Mitchell?" And let's take care of him. Let's treat him right, as he's a Bucs fan coming all the way in from Western Canada to see the game. Well, hey, fans, listen, you can send in your reviews and your emails. That really helps spread the word about the Pewtercast and lets everybody know what's going on over here. I always recommend you do that to iTunes. So just go over to iTunes and you got to do like a little search and click on reviews. You can leave your own review. You can leave a rating. We'll make sure that we read those here on air, or you can send me an email. You can do that to thepewtercast@gmail.com, and anything that you say, we do respond to them. We respond to all forms of communication, and if it's really good, like what Mitchell wrote here, remember, we might just read it on air. Well, hey, listen, Pewtercast fans, we've got another guest. We had Ben on from the Bucs and Brews podcast last week, did a fantastic job. And this week, I'd like to go ahead and bring on our guest who's going to be with us for the whole show. He's from the Pewter Plank. He's the co-expert for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Please welcome James Yarcho. How's it going, James?
Doing well, Brian. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing better. I can't really say I was doing fantastic, but I'm doing better. I don't know about you, and I think like most Bucs fans, you know, we were so looking forward to Arizona. We had such high hopes for that, and to see them just get dashed upon the rocks like they did, man, it was hard, but I'm doing better. I'm doing good. How about yourself?
Well, time heals all wounds. You know, a little bit removed, a little bit away from the hot takes. It helps. So we can kind of go back and look at this with a more critical eye, without overreacting, because that's something that we as Bucs fans as a whole love to do, overreacting, whether it's a win or a loss.
Yeah.
So got to get ready for the Rams game,
Yeah, and I tell you, you're right. We either overreact or we underreact. It's one of the two extremes. There's very now and truth be told, a 40-7 loss on something that's going on with the Bucs right now is we're changing our culture and the excitement of Dirk Cutter and the excitement of things coming in. Maybe we should overreact just a little bit, maybe we really, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. But as you say, time does heal all wounds, and it's, it gives us time to kind of come back down. And, the team certainly has been saying it, and we say it too. You just got to move on. At the end of the day, it's one game, and there's 16 of these. So it's just one. We got to keep moving on. But we can't have a whole season filled with just one games,
Right.
Yeah. Well, James, you're going to be with us the whole show. So let's go ahead and get into a little bit of review of the show of what's coming up. Of course, in our main topic today, we are going to be reviewing this is a family-friendly show. I can't say the word I was just thinking of. I think the guys over at pewterreport.com called it the debacle in the desert. So maybe that's what we'll call the main segment today. We're going to be reviewing the game at Arizona where the Tampa Bay Buccaneers took a bath at 40-7, and we'll be grading them out. But then moving into happier topics, we'll be talking about the top 3 Buccaneer blowout games. That should be a really fun top 3 list to get into. Then we've got a brand new segment we're going to be adding in. We're going to be trying it out, James and I are, called Rants and Raves. So, James, if you're ready, let's get into it. You're listening to the Pewtercast, episode number 12, Recover, Recover, Recover. Well, James, here we are in this topic. We are going to be talking about the debacle in the desert. Arizona Cardinals facing the Bucs and at their house. We were over there, facing them, and the Bucs came home with a 40-7 L in the column. James, before we go any further, I feel like we just kind of have to get it out of our system, just so we can kind of be done with it once and for all and move on with the rest of the game. So here's what I want to do, James. I want to give you 30 seconds to find as many words as you can to describe this game, and you can say anything you want. All the handcuffs are off, all the shackles are off. I've got my finger on the censor button should it get a little too crazy. And if you're ready for it, man, you've got 30 seconds. Go.
Abysmal, disappointing, half-hearted, frustrating, off. I'll use the word off, and I can get into that later. Heartbreaking. Learning experience. Injuries. Cover problems. I think that's all I got.
Yeah, and 3, 2, 1. Yeah, if I may add to that, horrendous, embarrassing. Yeah. And here's the thing, James. Every single word you said, you're right. Yeah, you can't defend it. I think if Dirk Cutter was sitting here across the table from us right now with a microphone, he would look at you just kind of like he did to the media guys and just go, "Yep, you're right. Yep, you're right. Yep, yep, you're right. Yes, you're right. Yep, no arguments here. Yes, you're right." Okay. So now that that's done, that was a bit cathartic, not lethargic, cathartic for me. James, what do you got for us on the Bucs versus Arizona game? Kind of some overall thoughts. What do you got?
Well, one of the words that I used was off, and it was the whole team. The whole team was off. We came out clicking on defense. The Cardinals had 3 possessions where they punted. We were moving the ball down the field relatively well, and Jameis misses Evans on that deep ball that gets intercepted by Peterson, which I look at that as probably the lone turnover besides that Hail Mary at the very end of the game with no time left that you can really put on Jameis. Mm-hmm. Evans, yes, should have made a better play on the ball, but the ball placement was bad. It was on the outside. If it was on the inside, we're talking about what an amazing pass that was. And he challenged Patrick Peterson and succeeded. And,
right.
And we're praising him for it. And that changes the entire dynamic of the game. They hit that pass and go up 7-0. We could be talking about a very different outcome right now. But as I said, the whole team was off. As soon as Luke Stalker went out, the run game fell apart. Then we lose Doug Martin. Charles Sims gets gobbled up at the line of scrimmage. And I know people like to talk about how running backs are a dime a dozen, and Charles Sims looks better than Doug Martin in week 1, and in ways he did. But Charles Sims can't break the tackles, can't get past that initial push by the defensive line the way Doug Martin can, and it showed. Now, the Cardinals defense are no slouches. They were Super Bowl favorites heading into this season.
Right.
Week 1 was not indicative of who the Cardinals are, just like I don't believe week 2 is indicative as to who the Buccaneers are.
But wouldn't you say, though, James, the Cardinals lost to the New England Patriots by a field goal, right? I mean, wasn't it 1 point actually? Yeah. And the field goal would have put them over. It was a bad snap on the long snapper. That whole thing just kind of got thrown off. Arizona still competed with New England.
Sure.
Tampa Bay did not compete this past week. And I agree. I love what you said. This game is not indicative of who the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are. And I think you're right. If the Bucs come out and prove us otherwise, if the Bucs come out and prove us right, which I think they will, and I think they're going to go on, and I think Dirk's got everything in his tool bag to be able to help the Bucs see, to help the team see what this really is, and see it for what it is, to use it as a learning experience. But there's such a marked difference between saying that, week 1 was not indicative of who the Cardinals are, just like this is not indicative when you consider the point spread between the two games. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, absolutely. And I look at this past game, again, a few days removed, the cooler heads prevailing type of approach. It was the perfect storm. Everything that could go wrong for the Bucs did, including all the injuries that were sustained. And I realize that people say injuries are not an excuse, and to a certain extent, they're right. You got to have that next man up. But like I had said post-game, you lose Robert Ayers, and that defensive line becomes the exact same defensive line of last year that did nothing. And that's even without Jacquez Smith. Right. So it's even worse than the line that we had for the majority of last year. We had Noah Spence get his first sack, which is fantastic. But if this line is going to succeed, he needs to be more consistent and even better than he's already shown this year. You lose Doug Martin, so you lose the run game. You lose Luke Stalker, which I got into a debate with somebody on Twitter about during the game, that Luke Stalker is the best blocker on this team.
Right.
Hands down, he's better than any offensive lineman we have. So when he went down, the run game was lost, and it all fell apart for everybody at the same time. You even had Aguayo missing his first kick. It was definitely the perfect storm. So I don't believe that the Buccaneers are nearly as bad as they showed they were in week 2. Teams just have those games. It happens. I went through earlier today, and I know, Jameis is going to get knocked for his 5 turnovers. I went through and I looked at all of the quarterbacks that had 5 or more turnovers in a game. You would not believe this list. You have Hall of Famers with multiple games with 5 and 6 turnovers in a game, and these were just interceptions. It didn't include fumbles.
Okay, so now I'm interested. So throw out some of these names because I want to know that Jameis is in good company here. So help us feel better. Who are some of these names that you saw on there?
You got Ken Stabler. He had 7 picks in a game. You had Joe Namath throw 6 interceptions 3 times and 5 interceptions 3 times. Manning had 6 interceptions in a game.
Wait, which Manning?
Peyton.
Okay.
Peyton. You had Favre throw 6 and 5 in games. You've had Warner throw 5 in a games. You've had Archie throw 5 twice.
Wow.
Bart Starr 5, Eli 5 twice, Elway 5, Marino 5 3 times, Bradshaw twice, Aikman. I mean, this is – people like to hurry up and point out, Jameis choked and all this. It happens. It does. It just – the Cardinals were the better team. They showed up. The Bucs didn't. But there's no need to overreact to Winston's performance, especially when I go back to my earlier point that really only one of these turnovers was genuinely Jameis's fault. You had right. Sims knock the ball out of his hands for a fumble. You had the ball tipped twice, right. which was intercepted in return for a touchdown. You had Vincent Jackson causing his 2nd interception in as many weeks. It was an all-around bad performance for everyone. So what I take from this, and I hope it's what a lot of people take from this, is this is not Lovie Smith's team anymore. This is not Greg Schiano's team. This is not Raheem Morris's team. How does Cutter's team respond? How does right. Cutter's team apply what happened and take what they learned from this loss and take it out on the Rams? What is Cutter's team going to do? This was a very Lovie-esque loss, but it's not Lovie's team. So what are they going to do? Levante David, 0 tackles.
Right.
He is going to come out hyped. He is going to be angry. He's going to be on fire, and he is going to make Todd Gurley. He's going to make it his personal mission to shut Todd Gurley down. Quan Alexander, same thing. He had a bad game. As great as he was in week 1, he had David Johnson throwing him off tackles like he was nothing.
Right.
So you got to look at this team as, where's Cutter going to take them? Where is Jameis going to take them? And how do they bounce back against the Rams? And I think they're going to bounce back well. This is a team, in the Rams that hasn't even scored a touchdown this year. How they beat the Seahawks without scoring a touchdown is beyond me. But that's what I take away from this is this was early enough in the season that they can learn from it, they can grow from it, and they can make sure it doesn't happen again, that we don't have a blowout against the Falcons situation and then turn around and get blown out by the Ravens situation like we did in 2014. Right.
Yeah, it really I mean, you talk about that. How is Cutter's team going to respond to that? And I mean, that echoes to the title of this entire episode of Recover, Recover, Recover. It's going to be about how these Bucs recover. I mean, make no mistake, this was a horrendous game. Everyone's talking about how it kind of showed promise during the first quarter, but then it just all went to hell after that. But you know what I noticed was different, and what I thought was different about this game, and I was thinking about it. I kind of rewatched the game. In previous years, under previous regimes, you could go back and you could find one play. You could find one play where the entire momentum of the game seemed to shift, and they never got it back after that particular game. And I never felt like we had that one bad play in this game where everything just fell apart afterwards. I didn't get a sense. This was more like a massive culmination of just dirt piled on top of dirt, piled on top of dirt, piled on top of dirt. As you put it, a perfect storm of sorts, where it wasn't just this one thing and we couldn't overcome it. We just got hit. I mean, I took my kid to the beach this summer, and he got out there in the middle of the waves, and he was just getting clobbered left and right. It was just a real kind of, just one of those wavy days in the ocean. And thankfully I was there with him, but I mean, he didn't last but 2 minutes in that ocean before he had to go in, because he just kept getting hit by these waves. And that's what it felt like to me with this game. And that's much harder, I think, to recover from when it's just wave after wave after wave versus just one bad play. But now we got to zoom out. And how are we going to recover from the game? Not just one play so that we can win this game, but how do we recover from this game so that we can win this season? because that's what we've got to start looking at now is the season as a whole, not just the one game, especially when when we're outside of the game and we can take a look at that. Yeah, there's no reason to go back for me, I think, to rehash, because you said everything that everybody else has been saying. Jameis was off, and, Vincent Jackson. What the hell is going on with Vincent Jackson? I mean, do you have any thoughts on that? I mean, oh my gosh.
Oh, I got plenty of thoughts on that.
Well, please, I'd love to hear them, because I'm at a loss. If you can say them on this show, go for it, because I don't know. I mean, VJax, oh my gosh. What happened to you, man? Is he done? Let me ask you that, James. Do you think, is VJax done?
I don't want to think that VJax is done. And I'll have a piece about this up on Pewter Plank on Wednesday. But all the signs, to me, the body language, the lack of interest, the lack of production shows me that I think VJax wants to be done.
Yeah.
And I hope I'm wrong.
Yeah.
And I can't remember who said it. I want to say it was somebody on 620 WDAE in Tampa said that it takes a few weeks for these older guys to get their legs under them once the season starts. They're coming off OTAs, they're coming off training camp, and they got to get their legs under them. So they start off a little bit slower. We've seen that with Darrelle Revis. Darrelle Revis is having a rough start to the season. He's an older guy. And it pains me as a 31-year-old to say that a 33-year-old is an older guy, but we're talking football years.
Right.
So maybe this is just part of Jackson's slower start to the season, getting his legs under him, getting in his rhythm. But think back to week 2 of last season. Coming off that awful Titans loss, you had an amazing throw and catch for a touchdown against the Saints from Winston to Jackson. And it seems like they're not on the same page. They're not in any kind of sync whatsoever. And Jackson has cost this team possessions in back-to-back weeks. He has to wake up. There's no way about it. And if he doesn't wake up, if we don't see something out of him against the Rams, at this point, it would be better for him to not be on the field. And it pains me to say that because I'm such a huge Vincent Jackson fan. I put him in my top 5 favorite Bucs of all time. I absolutely love that guy. But when you're not helping the team, when you're not helping your quarterback, when you're not helping your offense, you need to be on the sideline until you either figure it out or just quit.
Right. Well, I mean, it'd be like bringing back Warren Sapp or Derek Brooks or John Lynch or one of those guys like right now. As great as they were, as much as we love those guys, and I like you, like with I think the rest of Bucs Nation, like we love Vincent Jackson. Like there's no hate or animosity towards VJax. I think it's just a question like are you done? Like it's okay if you are. I mean, we hate it. We love you, but if you're done, you're done. And I don't know. I mean, I said it last week that even if Vincent Jackson isn't making big plays when he's on the field, it does make a difference to the team as a whole. But it certainly did not show. Certainly did not show this last week. So hey, listen, everybody, be looking out for that coming out with Pewter Plank. Some more thoughts about Vincent Jackson, and you guys definitely chime in. Let's move over. I want to talk about Sims for just a minute because I don't know about you, James, but I've not heard anything coming out of Doug Martin. I know they were supposed to do some MRIs today. I've not heard any news on that just yet. But let's play the what if game. If Doug Martin doesn't come back, let's say he doesn't come back till after the bye week. Obviously that moves Sims up, to kind of our number 1 running back, and we've got Jaquiz who moves into that number 2 spot, and Peyton Barber kind of comes up to that number 3 unless they go outside and get somewhere else. But we saw it in the preseason, and I think we saw it this Sunday. As great of a back as Sims is, and he's part of the best 1-2 punch in the football in the NFL. He's not Doug Martin. And he has a different skill set than Doug Martin. We can't expect him to be Doug Martin. Charles Sims doesn't break tackles like Doug Martin. That play in Atlanta last week notwithstanding, he doesn't break tackles like Doug Martin does. Sims is a much better pass catcher than Martin is. And he gets yards that way. Sims is going to put it over the line in short yard situations. Sims is great in his normal spot, but he doesn't do great when he has to move up into that kind of Doug Martin role. And I don't know. That's the what happens, what happens if Doug is going to be out for a couple of weeks? And is there anything we really can do about it at this point? Do we just go with Sims and does Cutter rework his game plan around that, or what do you think?
Well, and I think you nailed it, that Sims is great in his role. And the not breaking tackle things, you nailed it. Yeah, he broke all those tackles against Atlanta, but he did it in space. He didn't do it at the point of contact. He didn't do it at the line of scrimmage.
Right.
He did it in space. So that's what Charles Sims brings to this team. What I was intrigued by, one of the few bright spots that I took away from Arizona, was that Jacquizz Rodgers did look good.
Yeah.
So no, he's not going to be Doug Martin, but that provides the level of the brute runner, the power back can be filled by Jacquizz while still keeping Sims in his lane. We don't want to sit there and take Sims like we saw on Sunday and make him that every down back, because that's not who he is. That's not how he succeeds. That's not how he helps the team. I think we are going to see a boost in Jacquizz Rodgers carries, because he can help fill that role. And you put the two together and they make a pretty darn good Doug Martin.
Right.
I think at this point, and I also haven't heard any kind of updates past the fact that Martin was getting the MRIs today, that it's probably best if Martin sits out at least a couple weeks, probably until after the bye week. With these hamstring injuries, especially with a running back who relies so much on cutting and juking and having to power through the way Martin does, if he comes back too soon, that hamstring's only going to get worse, and we're going to lose him for a much larger chunk of time. I would rather take our chances against the Rams, against the Broncos, and against the Panthers before that bye week without him, so that we have him for the remaining 11 games on the schedule, then rush him back this week or even next week and lose him for those 11 games after the bye.
That's a fantastic point, that it'd be so hard to see Doug not out there and not making the contributions that he's doing, and missing those kinds of games. I think we all, especially with Adrian Peterson going down, we all want Doug Martin to be that number one rusher in the league. He was so close last year, and man, I just on a personal level, I'd hate to see him lose that opportunity to rack up those yards, but. Yeah, I don't know. And if they do go with that, if that is what happens, and people might call me crazy, but I just wonder. I'm just wondering, because here's the thing. Doug Martin isn't really an every down back either. He's that first and second down back, and then we call up Chuck Sims, I'm just wondering, what if we moved actually Jacquizz into that, first and second down, because he is more of that attack at the line of scrimmage. He is more of that kind of a guy, where he's just more like Doug Martin than Charles Sims is. So let's put Jacquizz in Doug Martin's spot. Let's leave Charles where he does so fantastically great in his spot, because nobody else can be Charles Sims other than Charles Sims. I don't know. I'll be real interested to see how they do that. But and here's the last thought that I had on offense. And I've heard one other person mention this week. Where was the no huddle? This type of offense that works so well for us, it works so well in Atlanta. And actually, when we got into a no huddle situation in this game, it kind of started working. It was doing okay, but then we laid off of it. And if I'm sitting in the press media conference, and Greg Allman, if you're listening to this, or Scott Reynolds or Mark Cook, or any of you yahoos that are sitting in that media room, I don't want to call you yahoos. You guys are good. You're fine. But for any of you guys who are sitting in that's the question I want to ask Coach Cutter. Is where was the no huddle? Why did we not go with the no huddle more throughout this game? Because the no huddle works for this team. I mean, I remember I loved playing no huddle. It just moved so fast. It was so up tempo. It was so great. And no huddle is one of those things that when it's almost counterintuitive. Like, you want to think, hey, if things aren't working, if things aren't going great, you want to take a minute, you want to slow down, get in the huddle, talk about it, make sure everybody knows what they're doing. but there's something about the speed and the pace of a no huddle that breaks you out of a slump and just lets you go. And I was just the whole game I was just thinking, where's this no huddle that they need to get in the no huddle, go to no huddle, go to no huddle, go to no huddle. So yeah, I don't know. That was that's kind of my, I think, final thought on offense for this game is I want to see more no huddle.
And you're 100% right. And we've seen when Jameis has these slow starts, the fastest way to get him in rhythm and get him in sync with the rest of the receivers and the rest of the offense is to put him in that no huddle. He thrives in it.
Right.
And when you're going against a defense as good and as fast as Arizona's, to get them on their heels in a no huddle offense is only going to reap benefits. So yeah, I'm right there with you. I didn't understand why they didn't go to it after it was working there for that brief moment. And I could be wrong, but I believe that was the drive where he threw the interception to Patrick Peterson on the Evans bomb. So it was working. They were clipping down the field, and then they just went away from it. I don't know if they got scared or got conservative or what the deal was, but that's something that's so important to this offense is to run that no huddle and get Jameis in sync and get him in rhythm. And we've seen it decimate opposing defenses.
Right.
I sure as hell hope that we see a lot more of it this Sunday against the Rams, because the Rams defense,
they're
stout. No joke either.
Yeah, they're pretty stout.
I mean, make no mistake about that 28-0 loss to San Francisco on the opening weekend.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they just shut down Seattle. I mean, Seattle got hit with, I think, just as many injuries as we did.
Right.
But their defense, you saw what they did to us last season.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I don't think any of us thought that Rams game last year in the Color Rush, the ketchup and mustard game, was going to go the way it did. You know, that I mean, I
left after I was watching at home, and I left after the opening possession of the third quarter and went to see Star Wars. That was Star Wars. That was Force Awakens opening night. And I was like, I'm done with this game. I'm going to the movies.
You know, and you're probably a better man for it, to tell you the truth. You know, well, I mean, let's get there. Let's move on to final thoughts and grades with a look ahead towards the Rams. You know, sure. James, what are you thinking of as we come up on the Rams, and what are kind of your final thoughts on this game, and what grades would you give the offense, defense, special teams, and then just an overall grade to the team for this past week's performance?
Well, I think I've said all I'm gonna say on Arizona. We've relived it enough. Let's just move past it.
Right.
When it comes to the Rams, Todd Gurley is a little off so far this season. Their quarterback doesn't really scare anybody, whether it's Case Keenum or they're going to give Goff a shot. It doesn't matter. The defense is what has me worried. But again, you get into that no huddle, you get a little bit of momentum, a little bit of rhythm. Jameis is going to come out probably as hyped up as we've seen him in a Buccaneers uniform for this game.
Yeah.
He's taking this Arizona loss personally. He took it on his shoulders. He blamed himself, as any leader does.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to come out firing on all cylinders. So if they can get out to that fast start that we're dying to see, to come out in that no huddle and just start tearing it up down the field, we could be in for a really fun game. On the flip side, they come out flat and they come out playing even remotely resembling the way they did it in Arizona.
Mm-hmm.
We could be in for another long day. And we got another long wait. Those 4:00 games, I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
But the 1:00 games, when you're waiting for a 4:00 game, seem like they take 8 hours.
Oh gosh.
So
yeah, I think it was about 2:30. I was just going, okay, I'm done waiting. Let's just get on. Let's get on with these other games. I'm done.
That's exactly how I was. As far as grades go, I looked at it, and offense, I'm giving him a D-. And the only saving grace was that beautiful touchdown pass to Mike Evans. Other than that, there's really nothing to write home about. There's really nothing to get excited about in that game. The defense, I gave them an F. I don't think that needs much explanation. You had Brent Grimes give up another touchdown in the end zone, drop an interception.
And an interception,
that was right. And that was brutal. I mean, this guy's making $14, $15 million on this contract. and he can't defend a receiver in the end zone. He can't catch the ball that hits him square in the hands. That was incredibly disturbing. I think the defensive player of the game was Alteron Werner, and that was only because of the first possession. Everybody else looked awful.
Right.
Special teams, I gave him a C-. We had the missed Aguayo kick, which I think was just a culmination of the rest of the team, just as we discussed earlier, the perfect storm and just getting beaten down and buried the whole game. Anger looked good, and Adam Humphries had a real nice return, but at the same time, he's taking some unnecessary shots.
Right.
I don't like to see him taking the unnecessary shots. Either fair catch it, or you're inside the 10, get out of the way. Let it go into the end zone once in a while, because we're starting inside our 10 and 15-yard line when, that ball could be hitting back for a touchback, and we're starting at the 25. I realize it's kind of a double-edged sword. You let it go, it might get down at the 1, but,
But it could kick over.
At the end of the day, starting at the 1 and any better than starting at the 7.
Right.
So overall, I gave the team an F. Again, I don't think it needs too much explanation. You saw how they played. I saw how they played. If they were students in a classroom, they all would have been sent home with parent signature slips for disciplinary notices.
And they rightly should have. I don't know if you heard it or not, but on this past week's Buccaneers, I don't know what they call it, the radio show they do every night. Monday nights they bring on Coach Cutter, and then they actually have one of the assistant coaches come in. And this week they actually had the special teams coordinator come in and do a segment, and he talked quite a bit about it. If you've not listened to it yet, I would highly recommend go back. You can actually get it as a podcast. Just download it. It's the Tampa Bay Buccaneers official podcast, the one with Dirk Cutter from this last week. It gets, I don't know, it's probably 40 or so minutes into the podcast, they switch over to the other coach, and he talks quite a bit about what you just said there with Adam Humphries and why he was taking some of those risks and why he wasn't, and what their plans are and kind of what their guidelines are for how they go through that. I thought it was real interesting, but I'm not going to recap what he just said because everybody can go listen to that. As far as final thoughts for me, like you, James, this game's done. Yeah, I'm over it. It's time to move on. It's pissed me off. The longer we've gone, the more it's pissed me off, and it's pissed me off in a good way. Like I don't want to. The team needs to move on, but they don't need to forget what happened. Like they need to allow this loss. They need to allow this humiliation to fuel them for the entire rest of the season. And the real test is going to be, and we've already discussed this just a little bit, how do they recover? Especially from something so humiliating. Warren Sapp had his "this shit ends now" moment in the face of humiliation. And this could be a turning point for the team if they let it. This could be the turning point for greatness. And it may not fully be realized by the end of this year, but we certainly would be knocking on the door and we would be making a lot of noise if the team chooses. And that's a thing. They can actually choose to let it be that thing that just gets them pissed off for the whole season. And this becomes their "this shit ends now" moment. Jameis is honestly going to be the one who rallies that cry. As far as grades, mine aren't too far off from yours. For offense, I just gave him a flat F. Defense, I gave them an F-, and you know why. Special teams, I grade them just a little bit higher than you on a B-. I thought the special teams, we actually played okay. And Aguayo missed that kick, but who really cares at this point? Overall, I thought the special teams people were where they needed to be. There wasn't any huge returns or anything like that. So I gave them a B-, and overall, certainly the team gets an F for this past performance. Where they go. Well, guys, that's going to do it for this segment. Now we'd like to know your thoughts on our thoughts. Did you agree or disagree with either James or I? Well, you can send me an email to thepewtercast@gmail.com, or you can shoot me a tweet at thepewtercast, or you can go over to facebook.com/thepewtercast. We do respond to each piece of communication, so send them on in. Well, guys, coming up in our next segment, coming off of this just amazingly bad blowout game, James and I are going to be discussing our top 3 Buccaneer blowout games, and I can't wait to see what James has kind of interpreted this title to mean. So you guys stick around, and we'll be right back. Welcome back, Bucs fans. It's now time for our top 3 segment. And if you remember last week, we had discussed whenever we have a guest on the show, we're going to move from a top 5 to a top 3. But we each, James and I both get our own top 3. So really, you're getting a top 6. So hey, James, I'm going to toss this one to you first. Did you have any criteria in picking your top 3, which is the top 3 Buccaneer blowout games? And what is your number 3 pick?
Kind of the criteria that I looked at was, what was the circumstance of the game? What was the significance of the game? And what significance did it have as far as impacting the franchise? So my number 3 pick, which you might be a little bit surprised by, is the infamous Thursday Night Football debacle, where the Falcons beat the Bucs 56-14.
Ooh.
Yeah, fun memories.
Yeah.
The reason I picked that is Buccaneers fans were all extremely hyped. That was our first primetime game under Lovie Smith. There was still some excitement, despite the fact that we had Josh McCown at quarterback, who he left that game with an injury, and that led to Mike Glennon coming in and beating Pittsburgh the following week. But to me, that game was the catalyst for the season that led us to Jameis Winston. Mm-hmm. That absolute atrocity of the game, I find that game far worse than any of the other times that the Bucs have been blown out over the past 5, 6, 7 years. It is ultimately exactly that it led us to Jameis. That was the kind of season that we had in a nutshell. And because of that, because of how bad that team played, how poorly they were coached, we now have the first franchise quarterback in franchise history.
Yeah, fair enough, man. That's a great pick. And certainly, kind of putting my little notes to you is you don't get to ask for clarification on what we mean by blowout game. So you can interpret it however you like. And you went with a blowout game where we actually lost. And, as you say, that is kind of the catalyzing moment that led to Jameis. And, I think I had this as a discussion. Was it last week with Ben? It might have been offline with Ben last week. Kind of how I feel about Lovey is I have a lot of respect for the man, but I feel about him like I do like some of my ex-girlfriends. Like, some of them I'd kind of like to forget and go, oh, why did I ever do that? But it's a part of my life. Like, it's a part of my history, and it's shaped who I am as a person today. And I wouldn't be who I am or where I am today without that as a part of my history. And that's kind of how I feel about Lovey and Greg Schiano and Raheem and all of those guys. Like, it's helped lead us to where we are today. And I think, and it's a much bigger question mark after this game last week, I think we're actually in a pretty good spot now, and we're certainly getting there. So, yeah, man, I think that's a good pick. As far as criteria for me, it was really just, it had to be a game that sticks in my mind. And the Bucs didn't necessarily have to win. I didn't have that as one of my criteria. They could have won it or they could have lost it. And the first one I'm going with is actually one where they lost, and it's not going to sound like a blowout because the game was actually only a 1-point difference by the time it got to the end. And the one I'm talking about is a game that has come to be termed the collapse at the Capitol last year, where the Bucs took on the Redskins and we lost 30-31. And here's how I'm kind of qualifying this. If you take the game apart by halves, the Bucs blew out the Redskins in that first half. I mean, we went into the half at 24-7. And you capital, you roll that out to a second half if everything went the same. It'd have been a 48-14 game. Like that's a blowout of a game. And it was a fun first half, a really, really, really fun first half. But then you take a look at the second half, and the Redskins came out and they blew us out of the water 24-6 on points in the second half. And it turned into certainly a painful memory, but that first half sure was a whole lot of fun. But to me, that game, although the score doesn't say it, it just felt like a blowout. And it's one that just sticks in my brain as a, and like you say, it's got to be like a marking point. It's got to be a turning point. And I think that collapse of the Capitol, as early as it was in the year, might have been the thing that, I don't want to say it was not the final nail in the coffin of the coaching job of Lovie Smith, but it might have been when the lid fell. I think every loss after that was just an extra nail in it, but I think that might have been when the Glazers and even Light kind of started turning that way and kind of saying, okay, is it time to start doing, time to start thinking about the coaching job. But that's my number 3 pick, is the collapse at the Capitol. Not really a blowout in the end, but it was on each half. So, James, what'd you have for your number 2 pick?
Well, real quick before I get into number 2, I'll throw this out there to go back to you talking about Lovie Smith and the ex-girlfriend comparison. When a lot of Bucs fans get down on the team and they're upset, I like to remind them that they all got rid of Lovie Smith. He's coaching my beloved Fighting Illini. So I still have him in my life in a different capacity, but still causing just as much pain.
I was going to say, how'd that work out for you this past week? Because I saw that score.
You know what? It was the perfect storm for me this weekend. Illini lost, Bucs lost, both fantasy teams lost. It was a rough weekend, Brent. My number 2 game, we're going to rewind the clock about 9 years to December 16th of 2007, when the Bucs beat the Falcons.
Yeah.
We're gonna throw out another Falcons game. They won 37-3. And the reason that this is on my list was this was the first ever kickoff return for a touchdown in Bucs franchise history. And to me, that fell into my criteria of a significant franchise impact. How many years did we go with Fox and CBS and ABC and NBC and ESPN, whoever was showing whatever Bucs game, any kick return, we get that little blurb up there. The Buccaneers have never returned a kickoff for a touchdown in franchise history. And it was done on that game. And it was just an all around just beat down to the Falcons, which I tend to enjoy. They're my second least favorite team in all of football behind the Panthers. So yeah, that's what hit at number 2 for me, was that record-setting moment for the franchise.
Yeah, it's always a good one to get a blowout win especially against a division opponent. Mm-hmm. Especially where Dirk Cutter says, hey, those division games count twice, and so if you get a blowout on a division game, that's 2 blowouts. And hey, I like it. I think that's a fantastic pick. My number 2 pick, I'm actually returning to last year. Remember, one of my criteria was it had to stick in my brain. And this game last year was termed the most complete team win by the Buccaneers, and I would agree with it, that I've ever seen. Just on offense, defense, special teams. And this was the Eagles game from last year where the Bucs won 45-17. And James, I don't know how much you remember about that particular game, but it was a game that was clicking on every single level. There was a lot of talk about whether Lovie was going to be able to prepare the Bucs for the Chip Kelly no huddle offense where they just go, and it was going to wear everybody out. And for everything that he did, Lovie did it right. He prepared the defense exactly as they needed to be prepared. The Dirk Cutter prepared the offense exactly as they needed to be prepared. And I guess the special teams guy did too. They went out there and they just walloped on the Eagles. And you know what it is? Do you remember it was back before the Super Bowl when Tampa Bay beat the Eagles in the old Veterans Stadium, right? Veterans Coliseum, whatever they called it. And it was the very last game in that stadium before they tore it down. And the Bucs went in there and just beat them and got into the Super Bowl. And then the very next season, when the Eagles moved into the Lincoln Financial Stadium, the brand new one, they also happened to face the Bucs in the very first in the season opener, and we went up there and beat them again. So we beat them in the last game of their old stadium. We beat them in the first game of their new stadium. And so I get a kick out of every time seeing the Bucs just beat up on the Eagles. And that, I think, is why this one makes my number 2 pick, 45-17 Bucs over the Eagles from last year.
Yeah, that Monday night game to open the Eagles' new stadium was when Joe Jurevicius had one of the best catches I'd ever seen.
Joe.
He tipped the ball up in the air to himself.
Oh yeah, Joe.
He had 2 touchdowns in that game.
Yeah, Joe. Oh man, Joe's one of those guys. I don't think he ever got enough accolades as a Buck that he should have, because I loved watching Joe Jurevicius. I liked saying his name even more. It's one of the reasons I miss Javorsky Lane. I like saying the name. It's fun. Speaking of which, Javorsky Lane, he had a tweet come out, I think it was earlier today I saw, where he's talking about his rehab a little bit. So, all right, James, well, let's get into it. The nitty gritties. What did you have as your number 1 Buccaneer blowout game?
I'm going to go out on a limb and say that we have the same number 1 game.
It's very possible, my friend.
It's the Super Bowl. It has to be the Super Bowl.
Yeah. Why wouldn't it be?
Has there ever been a more dominating performance by the defense in a more crucial situation? It was just, and I have friends that, oh, well, the game was a blowout. We went bowling. We didn't bother watching. It was phenomenal in every aspect of the game. And yeah, the Raiders tried to come back a little bit, but never once were the Bucs or Bucs fans worried in any way.
Right.
It was just a beatdown from the minute Allstott got into the end zone.
Mm-hmm.
Not bitter end, but glorious end. Bitter for
Right.
Raiders fans. They're still mad.
Yeah. I think the only thing that I'm mad about coming out of that game is the fact that the very next year Warren Sapp went into play for the Raiders. I mean, but it was just a fantastic game, and obviously it made my number 1. They called it the Pirate Bowl. I didn't know that until today. I was looking for some stats about the Super Bowl game, and somebody said, "Oh, it's the Pirate Bowl." I never heard that, but hey, whatever. But yeah, definitely Super Bowl 37. I mean, it was the most glorious of glorious days in Buccaneer football history, and it's a day that we all yearn to get back to.
Oh, absolutely.
You talk about those kind of the golden years of the Buccaneers, and man, we've got to be able to reclaim them. But it definitely qualifies as a blowout game. And when you get to hoist that Lombardi Trophy there at the end of the game, there's nothing much sweeter as a fan, as a player, as a coach, all the way around. It just unites Bucs Nation all together. And like you, that one is certainly my number 1. And I kind of feel a little guilty picking it because it's so easy, but how could you not, because of how big it was,
And my 7-year-old son still watches that game. I have the Super Bowl champions DVD.
Yeah.
And he'll still pop it in and watch it. And so he knows all about Brooks and Lynch and Sapp and Rondé and Allstott.
Mm-hmm.
And he loves watching Michael Pittman run. Yeah, I was always a big fan of Pittman. I enjoyed the way he played.
Mm-hmm.
So even he still gets engulfed in it all these years later.
Yeah, it's I'll tell you, I got for the first time this year, I got NFL Game Pass, so you could go back and watch those. And the very first thing that I did with it when I got it was I went back and I watched the Super Bowl game, because they have the archive of all the Super Bowls on there. So very first thing I did after I got it, and I bought it for this year so I could kind of watch some of the extra film and go back and see the other games and stuff. So all right.
I think I've watched it so many times that I have Gene Deckerhoff's play-by-play memorized.
Oh, sure. And hey, that's not a bad way to watch that game, is with Gene Deckerhoff's audio over top of it, because that's
it's fantastic.
Oh, he's amazing. Yeah, he's just amazing. So, all right. Well, Bucs fans, we would now like to know how your picks stack up against ours. Was there a game that we missed? Did you happen to think of another Buccaneer blowout game that you'd like to add to the list that we have here? Well, you can let us know by connecting with us on Twitter at the Pewtercast or on Facebook.com/the Pewtercast. Or for you more winded types who need more than 140 characters, shoot us an email to thepewtercast@gmail.com. Well, James, before we get out of here on this segment, let's take a look at this week's poll. All right, James, for this week's poll, I had kind of put this out there, and I said, I said at the beginning of the season that I think the Bucs are going to go 10-6 this year, and even after this game, that has not changed for me. So my question was, did the blowout in Arizona this week cause you to change your end of season predictions? And the answers were yes, the Bucs will win more now, or no, or yes, the Bucs will lose more now, or no, it stayed the same. James, would you care to take a crack at this? Where would you have voted, and where do you think the fans voted on it?
I will say that no, I believe they will still win the same. When I did my week by week NFC South predictions for the entire division, I had the Bucs losing this game, and I still had them finishing 10-6. I still believe that they can win 10 games. I don't see any reason to believe otherwise. Again, chalk it up as a bad game. But knowing the Bucs fan base, I'm going to go ahead and say that the majority voted yes, they changed their minds, and they think the Bucs will win fewer games than they originally thought.
Well, for that, I'll tell you, 82% of the people who voted in this particular poll actually sided with you, James. They said no, it stayed the same.
Right.
They thought that the Bucs were going to lose this game, and they don't think that it's going to affect future games. And I would say honestly, if it affects anything, I think it'll help them win more. If they can carry that fire underneath them and not just get past this game, not just forget this game, but actually let it fuel them, I definitely think that they could wind up winning more. But it has not changed my prediction of 10-6 either.
Well, I'm certainly proud of the Bucs fans not completely overreacting. Hopefully they let the game get out of their system a little bit before they voted.
Yeah, well, we didn't put the poll up till about 3 hours before this particular show, so there wasn't a whole lot of time for them to vote. So, all right, guys, well, that's going to do it for this segment. Coming up next, we're going to close out the show with a brand new segment that we call Rants and Raves. Stay tuned. Hey, Pewtercast fans, Brent Allen here, and I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you so much for how you've been supporting the show. Whether you've been downloading the show or sharing it with your friends, or you've been commenting on Facebook or on Twitter, or you've sent me an email, the love and support you guys have shown for the show has been outstanding. It has been phenomenal. I've been watching the numbers. I get those reports literally every day. Anytime I pop online and I look at them. And the numbers just continue to climb. They continue to spike. They continue to just, everything's moving up and to the right. And I am so thankful for all of you guys who have really been supporting the show. And I wanted to let you guys know about a new way that you can support the show. You can support us financially, which would really help keep the lights on here, because it does cost a little bit to do this. And one way you can do that, you can leave a one-time donation over at paypal.me/the Pewtercast. You can leave a little tip over there for us that'll help us help us kind of offset some of the cost of the fees. And hey, listen, if you are interested in becoming an official sponsor of the Pewtercast, I would love to talk to you about that. Just shoot me an email over at thepewtercast@gmail.com, put sponsorship in the subject line, and I'd love to have that conversation with you. Welcome back, Pewtercast fans. It's time for our discussion segment of the week. And this week, we've got a brand new segment called Rants and Raves, where James and I are each going to be picking a topic that we will either be ranting about, meaning it kind of pisses us off, or we're going to be raving about it, means we love it. So, James, are you going to be ranting or raving on your first topic? What is it?
Well, I kind of already ranted on Vincent Jackson and Brent Grimes, so I think I'm going to start this off with raving. Let's get some positivity going. We did a whole lot of negative about the Cardinals. I'm going to go ahead and rave about the play of Vernon Hargreaves.
Okay.
And I will be the first to admit, and a lot of people know this, I was very vocal about it on the website, on Twitter, on any social media that anyone can find me. I wanted nothing to do with Vernon Hargreaves in the first round. I was very adamant about it. I didn't believe that a corner the size of me was going to help this team the way that it needed to be helped. And I was one of the ones pounding the table. I wanted Noah Spence. I wanted Robert Kimdichie. I wanted pass rush.
Right. And
the second round selection of Noah Spence really eased me in the decision to take Hargreaves. I was fuming on draft night. Yeah. But I'll tell you what, I am more than happy to raise my hand and admit how wrong I was. This kid can be something very, very special. He has played phenomenally in the first 2 weeks, and I could not be more excited to see him continue to develop and grow with as good as he already is. And one of my favorite things about him, after the draft, I went back and I was watching a lot of film on him and, trying to piece together what was so great about him that the Bucs picked him 11th overall after trading down. And one of the things that I really love about him that we've seen in the first 2 weeks is he loves contact. He is not afraid to race up to the line of scrimmage and take somebody out. And the other thing, he's not going to miss many tackles. He's really not. This kid is as sure of a tackler at the corner position as I've seen probably since Rondé. He's absolutely phenomenal. I love this kid, and I'm so excited to see him continue to play this year.
Yeah, and something that I think makes all the difference for Vernon Hargreaves is the fact he's a hometown kid. The Bucs was his team growing up.
Yes.
And, I mean, I could only imagine if I'm 12 years old loving the Buccaneers, that in 10 years I'm a member of the Buccaneers. Like, that's phenomenal. And, if Vernon gets to play his entire career here in Tampa, I mean, that's going to be something that's just so special for him. It's going to make him hit harder, run faster, stay in shape more. All those things that he has to do to be great. And Vernon really, it might be a little too early to call to say how great he potentially could be, but he is showing the signs of somebody who could be great. But it's just there's just going to be a little bit more fuel to that, because it's his hometown team, because it's who he grew up loving and knowing everything about, and he's right here in town. I mean, he had the city of Tampa painted on the side of his shoes during the draft, which was nothing to do with the Bucs. It's just that was his hometown team. He's proud of his hometown. So
sure.
I think that's great, and certainly I was with you. Noah Spence was the person that I was personally eyeing in the first round. And the fact that he dropped all the way to the second and we still got him, I did my little happy dance jig. And I didn't think corner was our biggest need at that particular moment. But hey, they went with him, and I'm glad they did, and I'm glad he's a part of our team a whole lot. So I guess it's my turn. I too am going to be raving about something, and I'm going to be raving about something that Buck fans and the media types have been debating really this whole week. And James, I'm not really sure which side of the issue you come down on, but I'm going to be raving about the fact that Jameis Winston stayed in the game. The fact that he didn't come out. And I hear everybody. I know, I understand the arguments. I know why you would want to pull a man out of, when you're getting just a shellacking like that. And the guys on TV kept talking about it. I mean, for 3 series, they didn't shut up about why Winston was still in the game, and it even affected like the directors back in the truck, because instead of actually showing where the ball was going, they just kind of let the cameras linger a little bit on Jameis to see if he was going to get hit or not. And I understand it. I understand the argument for taking Jameis out of the game to kind of protect him a little bit, but I love the fact that he stayed in the game. And more than that, I love the fact that I think if Dirk Cutter would have tried to take Jameis out of the game, Jameis would have said no. And I don't know how much leeway Dirk Cutter gives a player, even one who is named Jameis Winston, when he gives them kind of an order. But the fact that Jameis stayed in, he was, as Cutter put it, he was the captain who went down with the ship. And Jameis Winston came in later and talked about that and said, no, it's my team. I'm not giving up on them. I'm not walking off the field to let them go out there and still do it. Like, that is the sign of a leader. That is the sign of maturity. That is the sign of a guy who has confidence in himself enough to stay protected, as I think he does at any point, but also is somebody who he just leads. That's part of being a leader. And if he would have willingly come off the field, I think he would have lost some of his leadership credibility with the rest of the team. I really do. So I love the fact that he stayed in the game. I get the worry and the fear and concern that he might have gotten hurt. And had I been Cutter, I actually might have taken him out of the game for that reason. But I love the fact that they didn't. And that's what I would like to rave about tonight.
And, I agree with you on a lot of that. And I think it's easy for us to talk about how that does help his leadership, how he wasn't going to give in and give up, and he was going to stay out there. And I love that quote by Dirk Cutter where he said, the captain wants to go down with a ship. At the same time, one of those shots that Jameis took at the end of the game tears his ACL or breaks his collarbone, we're having a very different conversation about a first-year head coach who was too stubborn to take out his quarterback, and now we've lost him for the season. So
I'm gonna hold on, James. I'm gonna play Dirk Cutter as you're talking about this. Okay, I'm gonna play the part of Dirk Cutter. Yep, you're right. Go on.
Okay. It's really easy for us, having seen the result, that Jameis is fine, to be good with the decision that was made. But if Jameis had gone down,
yep, you're right.
And we're talking about how we no longer have Doug Martin, we no longer have Robert Ayers, we no longer have Luke Stalker, we lost Cecil Shorts, Gerald McCoy got hurt, and now we lost Jameis Winston. This is a very unhappy fan base who is going to revolt at the home opener on Sunday.
Yep, you're right. You're absolutely right. You're right. Go ahead and write whatever you're going to write. You're right.
I love Dirk Cutter, man.
He's great.
I absolutely love that guy.
Yeah, you're right. Go ahead and write whatever you're going to write. Go ahead. It's fine. Go ahead. Yeah, man, that's where I sit back and I say it all the time. Like I preface it. I don't know how often I can say, I get it. I understand the arguments. I'm with you. I'm 100% with you. And at the end, the truth is, at the end of the day, he didn't get hurt. And at least as far as we know, they might be covering something up, but he didn't get hurt and he was fine and he stayed in the game. And I just think it made all the difference in the world. So, James, I think we got time for one more, man. You got one more thing you want to rant or rave about?
Yeah, I'll make it a quick one, and I'll do another rave. Like I said, we were pretty hard on them and pretty negative about the Cardinals game. Let's give some more optimism, and I'm going to rave about Mike Evans. This is a guy who the last game of last season gets thrown out for arguing with an official. We saw the immaturity. Yeah. Always looking for a flag. An incomplete pass was never his fault. It was always a penalty on the defense. We saw all the drop passes. And this year, through, again, small sample size, it's only 2 games, but he's been fantastic. You can see the level of maturity of him on the field. I've seen him ask for a flag one time, and it was this past Sunday against the Cardinals, and I think it was justified. The officiating throughout the NFL has been horrendous. And we saw a lot of that in the Cardinals Buccaneers game, and it goes both ways. I mean, the Bucs got away with some stuff too. So Mike Evans with the hands being as sure as they've been this season, and the level of maturity that he's shown, and not asking for the flags and not whining and not complaining, I think is really helping him take the next step towards being one of these upper echelon, on the verge of elite receivers. He's got to maintain it. We're only 2 games in. He's got 14 left to keep it up. But I think he's really taken that next step to where we need him to be for the success of the Bucs.
Yeah. I couldn't agree with you more. And I have a theory as to why his maturity has really come along so far in just one single offseason. And it's this. He got married this last year. And, marriage will shut you up real quick. My wife's in the next room. I better be careful. But she doesn't listen to this podcast, so I can go on and talk about it. I wonder what conversations him and his lady, as he calls her, have had about this whole situation. But no, man, that's, Mike Evans is great. And I had this as a note. I didn't mention it earlier. A lot of people giving Jameis flack for throwing so much to Patrick Peterson, whatever his name is. Who was with Mike Evans all night long. He didn't stay on one side of the field. He just was with Mike Evans all night long. And, I corrected some people earlier today, and I said, shh, he wasn't throwing to Pat P. He was throwing to Mike Evans. And Mike Evans, if he's not an elite receiver yet, he's on his way to becoming one. And, they spent this whole offseason working on this chemistry between Jameis and Mike. And I think Jameis was just trying to give him a chance to get the ball. It's Mike he's trying to throw it to. And Jameis had a couple of off throws, and Pat P is just so stinking good at his job. He kind of shut Mike Evans down for a lot of this particular game, but Mike Evans still came out and for the most part ran toe to toe. He never got, there were a few plays he got outplayed on, but I mean, look who he was going against, but Mike Evans really could be something special. And I think he's on his way. I wholeheartedly agree with you. And in order to do that, the maturity absolutely needed to happen. And, if I'm right and his wife had anything to do with it, then that just makes us all laugh and giggle a little bit inside.
Yeah, as great as Patrick Peterson played, Evans beat him a few times. Yeah. And again, on that interception that Peterson had, Evans had him. He had him boxed out, and the throw wasn't there. So we could be talking about Evans having 2 touchdowns over Patrick Peterson, and that's putting him in that conversation with Odell Beckham Jr. and Julio Jones. I'm not anywhere close to putting him on Antonio Bryant's level, but Evans he's at the door. He's knocking. He's close.
Yeah, he sure is. Well, I've got one more thing in this final couple of minutes of the show here. I've got a rant. I want to bring in a rant to this whole thing. And I'm ranting about a guy that I am normally defending on this show. I'm ranting about a guy that I'm a big fan of, unlike many Buccaneers fans. And I'm talking about Gerald McCoy right now. I'm going to preface everything I'm about to say with I am a fan of GMAC. I respect GMAC. I like what he brings to this team, and I don't criticize him too much. I saw something, though, in the open locker room interview right after the game in his eyes that I don't know what to make of it, but if we play it out, that's what I've got to rant against. And it's this. They had just this horrible loss that they suffered, 20 minutes earlier, maybe 30 minutes earlier. And GMAC's given his little interview to the media guy, and he's got all the emotion behind it. He's not processed it yet. And these guys are sticking microphones in his face. And granted, he opened himself up to being available to that by being in the locker room. He could have stepped out, but he seemed so resigned to the loss. And it harkened back to those old days when Lovey was here. That's what it reminded me of. Like that's what it stirred up in me, was just this, oh, woe is me. Oh, that's just the way it goes. Oh, we'll just get over this and move on to next week. And, it harkened back and it stirred up a lot of those old feelings for me. And the thing that I have to rant about is if that is something that is going to reinfect the locker room, it's got to go. And I don't care who it's coming from. Now, I'm not saying it's coming from Gerald McCoy. I'm not saying that he is catalyzing that, because I think there's just a lot of, that's just him as a person as he's processing something that just happened a few minutes earlier. He's not gotten to, we all know he's a pretty spiritual guy, so he's not gotten to take it in prayer yet or take it to the Lord or whatever. He's still figuring it out. He's still sorting it out in his head. But the Buccaneers at this point cannot afford to treat losses, especially losses like this, as run of the mill or everyday or anywhere near acceptable. And not just to say it's unacceptable and give it lip service, but to actually truly mean it in their heart and to say, no, it's not acceptable, to get pissed off about it and to do something about it in the next week. And that cannot be allowed to come back into our locker room at all, because it's not been here since Dirk Cutter was named head coach. Through this whole offseason, through OTAs, through training camp, even when we had the losses in preseason, it's not been here. You remember after we lost to who was that first game? Was it the Eagles? We lost to the Eagles, and you saw Gerald McCoy giving his interviews. He was pissed. He was mad, and he was kind of calling out his team, saying we weren't good enough here, we weren't good enough there. That's the kind of thing that we need to see from these guys coming out here. And I'm not saying pointing fingers at individuals, but to be able to be pissed off about it and be visibly shown, like, that's the kind of stuff that will fuel you till the next week. And that's my one rant that I guess I have coming out of this game.
And I'm with you there. It was very much, like you said, kind of woe is me. It was that the look on his face was the reaction that we were seeing on Twitter, that it was the same old Bucs. Here we go again.
Exactly.
It's the same old Bucs. And you know what? I have a very strong feeling that if any other particular members of that locker room that happens to wear a number 3 on his jersey, if he saw that reaction, if he saw that interview, he's going to have another chat with Gerald about that leader that he needs him to be. Yeah. He can't let him be the leader that kind of, excuse me, hangs his head, dips his shoulders. Oh, well, it happens. La-di-da. That's not who McCoy has been since Jameis had that conversation with him.
Right.
And I don't think that's going to be the Gerald that he's going to continue to be. As you've talked about, and I've talked about, a lot of us have banged this hammer ad nauseum. The culture has to change. And it starts with Cutter. It starts with Jameis, and it has to start with Gerald McCoy. Gerald McCoy has not known success in Tampa. So when stuff like this happens, he's going to revert back to the only thing that he knows, and that's failure.
Right.
And I don't want to see it. I don't like to see it. And I think that this week in practice, which I saw today that someone had said they had a bad week in practice last week. It might have been Cutter.
Yeah, he did.
It's going to be a rough one for the Bucs in practice this week, because Cutter's going to have them ready. Mike Smith is going to have them ready, and McCoy needs to step up and be that leader that Jameis talked to him about, or he can go hang out with Vincent Jackson. As much as I love the both of them.
Yeah, and I'll say this, and I am as much of a Gerald McCoy apologist as you're going to find. I really am. I love G-Mac. I want him on this team. He is a fantastic person to have on this team, and I think it's utterly ridiculous when people say that he needs to go to another team. He needs to get off. However, the one caveat I will give to that is and you're right, you make a really good point. Gerald McCoy has never known winning since he's come into the NFL. He's always been on a losing team. I think we forget that sometimes as fans. And if this is a thing that permeates over him, and this comes back and it starts seeping its way into the locker room through him, then we would be better off to not have Gerald McCoy on this team at all, to let him go somewhere else and get a fresh start and remove that toxin from our locker room. As important as Gerald McCoy is, we would be better to not have him if that's going to be a part of what infects this locker room. And I pray and I hope, and I don't think that that's what it is. I think we were just so close to the end of the game that he still has to process it. And if this is something that he's kind of carrying, it may take a little bit of time to really root that out. And a 40-7 loss is really going to bring up a lot of that in a player like Gerald McCoy. And as you say, I think Jameis Winston would be perfectly within his right, and he would do well as a leader to pull Gerald aside and say, "Hey, how are we going to handle this? Hey, take him out to dinner, go grab a steak, and all right, this is the way we as leaders need to respond." And to see Gerald McCoy responding to Jameis in the way that he has, to becoming a lead follower of Jameis in that whole situation, Gerald McCoy has it in him. He absolutely has it in him, and I want him on this team. And I think he could be that if he can get there. And like I say, I may be misreading that particular interview, but you apparently saw it, and you know what I'm talking about. It if it harkens that kind of stuff, I think it's at least worth noting throughout the team. So, well, guys, I think that's going to do it for our show, James. I want to thank you real quick for being here today. Man, it's really been a blast to get to kind of hang out with you and get to talk Bucs football. Why don't you tell everybody where they can find you on the internet?
Well, you can find us at, excuse me again, at thepewterplank.com. We are on Twitter and now on Periscope at the Pewter Plank, facebook.com/pewterplank. And if you want to follow me personally on Twitter, I am at Yarcho. It's YARCHO _Bucs. So, and Brent, I'd like to thank you. It's been a blast being on here, man. Like I said, pre-show, I've listened to every episode that you put out. I really enjoy what you do and how you do it. And it's been awesome to be a part of it.
Well, thanks, man. I really, really appreciate it. This has been a labor of love and trying to get out there, but there's so much about the idea of changing a culture, and this season in particular, I think is just a great case study to be able to see what's going to happen here with the Bucs. Is Dirk Cutter comes in as a head coach and kind of taking some stuff over. Jameis Winston's a little more settled into his role, and things are happening. And hey, listen, fans, you guys would do well to follow the Pewter Plank if you haven't been already. They really put out a fantastic site. James, you guys had a great I don't know what you call it, your pick six. Or whatever, yeah, coming off of the game. It was one of the most entertaining pick sixes I think I've seen in a long time. But it was really good. And well, James, before we get out of here, man, do you have any closing thoughts as we wrap up the show?
No, just I'm looking forward to the game Sunday, to get this taste out of our mouth, to open a game in front of the Bucs fans, so that they can finally be there and cheer on the new look Buccaneers, and hopefully come away with a W. I chalked this one up as a W when I did my predictions, and I think it stays that way. I don't think Sunday changes that. I believe that the Bucs are a better team than the Rams, and I'm just looking forward to writing my pick six recap on Monday morning with some positive spins this time instead of being so negative.
Yeah, well, we said it before. It's part of the title of the show. I think the name of the game is to recover. It's all about how the Bucs are going to come out and recover from last week. How do they take the fire that really should have been lit under them? They can come out looking extinguished from the game, but as time goes on, by the time they get to this point in the week, they start practice tomorrow, a new fire should have been lit that burns brighter and hotter and is just more blazy than it ever was before this thing that happened over in Arizona. And that's one of those things that I think is also true in life. We're always going to have setbacks in life, and part of it is just learning how to recover. It's just a part of life. It's part of being a human being. You don't have to let the situation determine anything. You get to determine the situation, just like the Bucs will get to go out and determine what is now going to happen to them as they move forward. Are they going to lay down and take it? Are they going to come back hungrier? Are they going to come back stronger? Are they going to come back with more resiliency as they go through. Are they going to recover? And fans, you too, when setbacks come in your life, you can come back with that same sort of resiliency, that same determination to move forward and to recover. Well, until next time, Bucs fans, it's time to saw some horns off some Rams. Go Bucs.